Have you ever wondered why the very things you hide are the ones that shape your destiny? Imagine this: a woman standing before a cracked mirror in a dimly lit room. Her reflection is fragmented, pieces scattered, each shard showing a different version of her face, some softer, some darker, some unrecognizable. She presses her palm against the cold glass, and for a moment she feels the fracture in her chest mirrored back at her. The mirror becomes more than an object. It is the testimony of a life lived in fragments, the silent witness of a self divided. The shadow waits in such places. It hides in the edges of that mirror, in the split between what she shows and what she conceals. Jung once wrote that individuation is not a path of light alone, but a confrontation with the darkness we deny. And yet, many women mistake suppression for strength, silence for survival. They cover their wounds with perfection, polish their masks with charm, and hope that no one notices the trembling underneath. But the cracks in the mirror remain, widening over time, waiting for the moment when the image can no longer hold. Heavy, isn't it? The realization that the parts of you you've banished are the very ones that hold your freedom. Think of the young girl who once laughed too loudly, too freely, until shame curled around her throat like a noose. Or the woman who dared to desire only to be told her hunger was dangerous, her softness too much. Those moments sink into the body, turning into armor and apology. The chest grows tight, the voice falters, the shoulders carry invisible weight. The shadow becomes not just a concept but a lived sensation, a body memory. Some women wake every morning with this unspoken ache, the sense that they are living half a life. They go to work, smile at friends, love their children, even hold hands with a man they call partner, yet deep down they feel unseen, and worse, unknown to themselves. It is as if they are playing a role scripted by someone else, standing on a stage where the lines are familiar but hollow. The shadow watches from behind the curtain, whispering, "There is more, but you will have to burn for it." Do you feel that ache? The paradox is that what you fear will destroy you is the very path that makes you whole. Individuation demands descent before it grants ascent. To find yourself, you must face the mirror not as it should be, but as it is, broken, jagged, unflinching. Every shard is a truth, every crack is a story, and the longer you avert your eyes, the sharper the glass cuts. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." The shadow is nothing more than the judgment you've cast upon yourself, the exile of your own humanity. The hunger, the rage, the grief, the yearning, they are not your enemies, but your neglected children. And what happens to children who are ignored? They scream louder, they act out, they sabotage until you finally turn your head and listen. Imagine holding one shard of that broken mirror in your hand. Its edge bites into your skin, a reminder that truth cuts. You want to drop it, to run, to find another surface that shows you flawless. But deep down, you know, the mirror is not here to wound you but to reveal you. And until you gather the fragments, you will always live in pieces, your power scattered across the floor of your own denial. There is a reason why love feels like betrayal when you have not faced your shadow. You mistake validation for safety, attention for worth, and in the end, you barter your soul for fleeting approval. You think you are choosing love, but really, you are avoiding yourself. And the cost? A life where freedom is always postponed, always conditional, always just out of reach. Do you know how many women carry this silent fracture? They look perfect in photographs, competent in careers, devoted in families. But behind closed doors, the mirror waits. And late at night, when the world is quiet, their chest feels hollow, their heart restless. They remember the girl they once were, the woman they might have been, and wonder, is it too late? It is not too late, but it will not be painless. Shadow work asks you to bleed where you once bandaged, to enter the locked room within your psyche, to meet the parts of yourself you swore you'd never see again. This is not cruelty. It is initiation. The paradox of individuation is that you only find freedom by walking through what you once called bondage. The mirror waits, and with each glance the question deepens. Will you keep hiding from the cracks, or will you dare to gather the pieces? Imagine the woman who finally dares to touch the broken mirror. At first, her hand trembles because every shard seems dangerous, sharp with memory. She remembers the day her father's silence felt heavier than punishment, the day her first love turned his back with a casual cruelty, the day she betrayed her soul. By saying yes when her whole body screamed no. Each fragment contains an image, and each image carries a weight. She realizes she has been living not in wholeness, but in avoidance, building a life around the fragments rather than through them. The shadow is never an enemy, it is an exile. Jung taught that what you resist not only persists, it grows stronger. Every repressed desire becomes a chain reaction, leaking through your choices and shaping your fate. The woman who denies her anger becomes passive until resentment corrodes her intimacy. The woman who denies her need for tenderness becomes hardened, mistaking isolation for strength. The shadow does not vanish because you ignore it. It sharpens, biding its time, appearing in lovers, in friendships, in the very patterns you swear you'll never repeat again. Do you see it now? The man you thought was different, who somehow echoes the same betrayals. The job you chased for status that left you feeling the same emptiness. The inner dialogue that tells you you're never enough, no matter how much you achieve. These are not accidents, they are mirrors. The world hands back the very wounds you've tried to bury, as if saying, you will not escape what you refuse to face. It is heavy to admit, but liberation begins here in the confrontation. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." The same is true for a woman. Comfort zones are often cages. Safety can be suffocating. And individuation, the path toward becoming whole, is not soft. It is brutal honesty with the self. It is looking into the broken mirror and saying, yes, this too is mine. Some women confuse shadow work with indulgence. They fear that acknowledging their darker impulses will consume them, but repression has already consumed them. What you deny does not disappear. It calcifies in your body. Notice the tightness in your jaw when you swallow your truth. Notice the heaviness in your chest when you say yes out of fear. Notice how your stomach clenches when your boundaries are crossed but your voice goes silent. Your body remembers what the mind tries to erase. Shadow work is not drowning in these memories, but integrating them. It is learning to let the ache speak, and then listening without flinching. Picture her now, the woman standing before the mirror. She bends down and picks up a shard, the one that carries the reflection of her rage. She holds it to her face, and for the first time she does not hide. She sees the fire in her eyes, the intensity of a woman who has been silenced too long, and she whispers, "This too is me." In that whisper, something unlocks. The shard does not cut her now, it gleams. Rage, once feared, becomes fuel. No longer a wild fire burning uncontrollably, but a steady flame that warms her courage. You too must face your fragments, your jealousy, your grief, your longing, your hunger, all the parts you have called unacceptable. They are not stains on your soul, but signals of your humanity. Imagine if you could hold them without shame, use them without fear. What would your life look like then? Can you feel the possibility rising in your chest, just beneath the ache? The paradox deepens here. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It is about reclaiming who you always were. The child who danced without hesitation, the lover who wanted without apology, the seeker who longed for truth more than approval. You buried her under expectations, under roles, under fear, but she is still alive, waiting in the fragments of the mirror. And the only way to reach her is to walk through the shadow. Do not mistake this for easy work. The shadow will resist you. It will tempt you back into denial. It will whisper that it's safer to play small, to stay silent, to keep the peace. But every time you choose comfort over confrontation, you trade wholeness for survival. And survival is not enough anymore, is it? You ache not just to live, but to live fully, to feel the fire of your own existence in every breath. The mirror remains cracked, yet something has shifted. The woman no longer stands trembling. She is bending, gathering shards, letting each one cut her just enough to remind her she is alive. She is no longer avoiding the blood, she is consecrating it. Shadow work is not about erasing pain, but transforming it into power. Each shard, once dangerous, becomes part of a mosaic, and slowly the reflection begins to change. Some women reach this point and turn back, frightened by what they've touched. They feel the first taste of raw truth and recoil, mistaking it for madness. They fear that if they open the door any wider, they will be consumed. But what they don't see is that the shadow has already been consuming them silently, through self-betrayal, through cycles repeated in love, through the quiet erosion of their worth. Avoidance is not safety, it is slow decay. Imagine her again, the woman with the broken mirror. She gathers another shard, this one holding the reflection of her grief. The weight of years presses down. She remembers the time she was abandoned, the funeral no one acknowledged, the losses she minimized so others would not feel uncomfortable. Her throat tightens, her chest feels heavy. This grief has lived inside her body like an unspoken prayer, shaping her posture, dimming her gaze. She lifts the shard and presses it to her heart. The grief surges, and for a moment it feels unbearable. But then she breathes, and the weight shifts. She realizes that grief is not a weakness but proof of her capacity to love deeply. What once suffocated her now softens her. This is the alchemy of shadow work, the transformation of pain into power. Jung called it individuation. The Stoics called it acceptance of fate. Both understood that freedom is not the absence of suffering but the integration of it. The woman who refuses to face her shadow is condemned to repeat it. The woman who embraces it becomes unbreakable because nothing within her is denied. She walks into the fire not to be destroyed but to be reborn. Do you recognize yourself in this descent? Perhaps you've carried a secret too long, one that eats at you in silence. Perhaps you've silenced your desires until even you no longer know what you want. Perhaps you've chased love as if it were salvation, only to find yourself emptier each time. These are not random misfortunes, they are signs of fragmentation. The mirror is speaking to you. The cracks are not accidents, they are invitations. Heavy, isn't it? The cost of not listening is always higher than the pain of facing the truth. The woman who refuses her shadow loses her authenticity. She becomes a ghost in her own life, wearing smiles that don't reach her eyes, repeating words that don't touch her soul. And deep down, she knows. Every night when the world is quiet, she feels the hollowness, the sense that something essential is missing. This is the voice of the self calling her home. The confrontation intensifies. She gathers shard after shard, holding her rage, her grief, her jealousy, her hunger. Each fragment cuts her, but each also returns a piece of her soul. Slowly, the mirror is no longer just a witness of fracture. It becomes a map of return. The very shards that once wounded her now illuminate her. She begins to see not just brokenness, but wholeness emerging from the pieces. This is the paradox. Only through fracture can true unity be found. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom is not the removal of darkness, but the mastery of it. The woman who integrates her shadow no longer fears her own depths. She can be tender without weakness, fierce without cruelty, vulnerable without collapse. She no longer needs to chase love or validation because she is no longer at war with herself. Every part of her belongs. But notice this. The world rarely celebrates such women. A woman who has met her shadow cannot be controlled, cannot be seduced by empty promises, cannot be guilted into silence. She will no longer contort herself to fit someone else's comfort. And that makes her dangerous. Dangerous to systems that rely on her submission. Dangerous to lovers who rely on her self-betrayal. Dangerous to the narratives that tell her she must be less in order to be loved. You feel that danger in yourself, don't you? The quiet fire that rises when you imagine refusing to apologize for who you are. The spark of rebellion when you think of speaking your truth, no matter the consequence. That is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the shadow once feared, now walking beside you as an ally. The woman stands before the mirror, her hands cut, her body trembling, yet her eyes alive. Around her feet the fragments lie like fallen stars. She sees herself not as broken but as luminous, every crack reflecting light. The descent is not over, but something irreversible has begun. She cannot return to the silence, the numbness, the denial. Once you have seen your shadow, you cannot unsee it. And once you have touched your wholeness, you cannot pretend you are incomplete. The deeper she goes, the more the shadow reveals itself not as monster but as mirror. What once terrified her now feels strangely familiar, like a forgotten language rising on her tongue. She realizes the shadow is not some alien intruder, it is her. The laughter she stifled, the rage she disowned, the tenderness she withheld, all waiting for permission to exist again. This is the paradox of individuation. You gain freedom not by escaping who you are, but by reclaiming what you abandoned. The confrontation becomes rawer now. She picks up a shard that shows her jealousy, the green flame she once called shameful. She had been taught that jealousy meant she was petty, insecure, unworthy of love. But as she stares into it, she sees something different. Jealousy is a compass pointing toward what she most desires yet has forbidden herself to want. It is not poison but signal. By denying it, she had denied her own longing. Now, instead of shrinking from it, she lets it guide her. She whispers, "This too is mine." And for the first time, she feels the clarity of desire without shame. Do you feel the sting of that recognition? How many times have you dismissed your hunger, convincing yourself you should be satisfied with crumbs? How many times have you silenced your longing, believing it made you weak? But the shadow is not weakness. It is the map of your unlived life. Each emotion you bury carries the blueprint of the woman you were meant to become. And until you claim them, you will remain half-formed, waiting for permission that will never come from outside. The negative stakes grow sharper. Every time she denied her shadow, she betrayed herself. Every time she settled for less, she carved another crack in her reflection. The cost is not just emotional, it is existential. A life unlived, a love unfelt, a voice unheard. These are the true consequences of avoidance, and they will devour you quietly until the day you realize your life has been nothing but a performance staged for the approval of others. She refuses that fate now. She gathers another shard, one that reflects her body, scarred, stretched, marked by time. She sees not the polished image she once tried to project, but the raw truth of her existence. For years she had compared, criticized, concealed. But as she stares at this reflection, something shifts. She sees strength in every scar, softness in every curve, resilience in every imperfection. The body she once judged becomes the vessel of her survival, the ground of her becoming. She whispers again, "This too is mine," and the mirror seems to pulse with light. The confrontation is not comfortable, but it is necessary. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The woman realizes that individuation is precisely this, reclaiming her mind, her body, her truth from the grip of denial. The world may still fracture, others may still wound her, but she will no longer wound herself. Her wholeness is no longer negotiable. Now the fragments begin to assemble. The mirror, once shattered, is no longer an object of fear but a puzzle of integration. Each shard she gathers becomes part of a larger image, not the flawless reflection she once desired, but something deeper. An image textured by shadow and light, grief and joy, rage and love. She sees not perfection but truth. And in truth, there is power. Can you feel it? The shift from fear to reverence. The moment when what once broke you becomes the very thing that heals you. This is the turning point. The shadow no longer hunts her, it walks beside her. She is no longer afraid of her rage, her grief, her jealousy, her hunger. They have become her allies, each carrying a wisdom she had long refused. And with them, she becomes whole. But the paradox remains. Wholeness does not guarantee peace. It guarantees freedom. And freedom is heavier than submission. It demands courage, responsibility, discernment. It requires her to no longer hide behind excuses, to no longer wait for permission, to no longer barter her worth for comfort. She feels the weight of this truth pressing on her chest, and yet, beneath the heaviness, there is a rising lightness, like breath filling lungs that had been empty too long. The woman stands before the mirror, shards now glowing in her hands. Her palms are scarred, her body tired, but her eyes blaze with a new fire. She sees herself not as fractured but as whole, not as victim but as sovereign. The descent has cut her open, but the confrontation has begun to stitch her together. The image is not complete, but the path is clear. She will not return to silence. She will not return to denial. She will not return to half a life. The ascent begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. After so much descent, so much confrontation, you would expect a trumpet of victory. But healing is not a spectacle. It is a slow, steady reclamation. The woman no longer flinches at the mirror. The cracks remain, yet they no longer terrify her. Instead, she begins to arrange the shards piece by piece, not to recreate the flawless image she once craved, but to form something truer, a mosaic. Each fragment gleams with its own light, and together they create an image more beautiful than perfection could ever hold. This is what individuation feels like. Not a sudden escape from darkness, but the weaving of darkness into light. Jung described it as becoming whole, not good. Wholeness means rage and tenderness, grief and joy, hunger and contentment, all living side by side without exile. She no longer needs to hide from herself. And in that acceptance, she discovers a freedom more profound than any approval the world could give her. Can you sense it? The shift in your own body when you imagine such wholeness. Your shoulders loosen, your throat opens, your chest expands. It is not the relief of escape, but the grounded strength of return. This is what happens when you stop betraying yourself. The body remembers safety not as numbness, but as full presence. Every breath becomes less of a survival mechanism and more of a declaration. I am here. I am whole. But notice this, the world rarely welcomes a whole woman. A woman who has met her shadow is unsettling because she cannot be controlled by fear, guilt, or scarcity. She does not chase attention, nor does she collapse when it is withdrawn. She does not beg for love, she chooses it. And she is willing to walk away when love becomes a cage. This unnerves those who benefited from her fragmentation, those who thrived on her silence. Yet her presence is also magnetic because authenticity always is. People may resist her, but they cannot ignore her. She feels this shift in her relationships. The man who once manipulated her silence finds no foothold in her truth. The friend who once thrived on her compliance withers in the face of her boundaries. The family who once expected her to carry unspoken burdens must now confront their own. Individuation does not just liberate the self, it reshapes the world around you. And though it may cost connections, it grants a deeper belonging, the belonging to yourself. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." The woman understands now. She cannot control others' opinions, their loyalty, their love. But she can control whether she betrays herself again. And that choice, repeated every day, builds an unshakable sovereignty. No one can give it to her, and no one can take it away. The mirror becomes her altar now. Once broken, once feared, it has become the place where she meets herself fully. Each morning she stands before it not to judge but to witness. She sees her wholeness reflected back, not flawless, not polished, but alive, textured, real. The cracks gleam like veins of gold, reminding her of what she has survived, what she has claimed, what she has become. What was once a symbol of fracture is now a testament of freedom. And here the paradox resolves. Individuation was never about chasing some ideal of light or perfection. It was about descending into the shadow, confronting the fractures, and then ascending into wholeness. Freedom is not found in denial, nor in escape, but in integration. To be free is to carry your darkness with dignity, to let it sharpen your truth instead of silencing it. Do you feel the weight of this truth? You cannot heal by pretending. You cannot become whole by choosing only the parts you like. You must gather every shard, no matter how sharp, no matter how heavy. Only then will the mosaic of your soul reveal itself. And when it does, you will see what the woman sees now, beauty not in spite of the fractures, but because of them. She steps back from the mirror, eyes blazing, breath steady. Her hands are scarred, but her heart is unchained. The woman who once trembled before the cracks now stands sovereign within them. She knows the descent was necessary, the confrontation unavoidable, the integration irreversible. She is no longer chasing freedom, she is freedom. And as she turns from the mirror, she carries its truth with her everywhere, in every step, in every choice. Some endings arrive with a thunderclap, but this one, like most transformations, arrives as a quiet knowing. The woman no longer seeks to repair the mirror into its original state. She understands now that perfection was never the goal. The cracks, the scars, the fractures, they were never her shame. They were the doorway. The broken mirror that once haunted her has become a sacred object, shimmering with the truth of her journey. She runs her fingers along the jagged edges unafraid. Once these cuts would have drawn blood. Now they feel like lines of poetry etched into her skin. She realizes she is not the girl who once begged for love, nor the woman who once disguised her hunger. She is something else, both and neither, a synthesis. Jung called it individuation, the union of opposites. She calls it freedom. And here the body remembers too. The chest that once carried unbearable tightness now rises with each steady breath. The throat that once closed in silence now hums with resonance. The shoulders that carried invisible burdens are lighter, strong without strain. The body no longer holds trauma as a prison. It holds it as a map, a record of what has been survived and integrated. What was once numbness has become aliveness. But individuation does not mean the shadow vanishes. The shadow remains a companion at her side. It will whisper again, it will test her again, because being human means living in the tension between light and dark. The difference is this: she no longer fears it. She no longer hides. When rage rises, she knows. It is her boundary calling for protection. When jealousy stirs, she listens to the desire beneath it. When grief returns, she honors her love rather than smothering it. Nothing within her is forbidden anymore. And that is freedom. Do you feel the shift in yourself as you imagine this? The thought of not needing to edit who you are, not for him, not for them, not for anyone. The thought of walking into a room with nothing to prove, nothing to hide, nothing to apologize for. Heavy, isn't it? Heavy because it demands everything you've avoided. And yet, beneath that heaviness, there is a lightness. The lightness of no longer being divided. The world will not celebrate this version of you. They may call you selfish, too much, difficult, intimidating. But remember this: every word they use to shame you is a word that once kept you small. And now, you are no longer small. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be whole. The world cannot control a woman who is not ashamed of herself. The broken mirror, once a symbol of fracture, now hangs on her wall like art. Not because it has been restored to its old form, but because it has become something greater. The cracks filled with gold, each scar a river of light. She sees herself in it every day, not flawless, not unmarked, but sovereign. The mirror is not her enemy anymore. It is her witness. And through it, she witnesses herself. Seneca once wrote, "The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately." The woman understands. She no longer postpones her freedom until the right man, the right job, the right moment. She does not wait for validation because her worth is not negotiable. She lives now fully because she has gathered every fragment of herself into wholeness. This is the paradox of individuation. You only find freedom by embracing what you once thought would imprison you. You only rise by descending first. You only heal by touching the wound. The shadow was never your enemy, it was the path. And now that you know this, you can never return to exile. So ask yourself, will you keep waiting, hiding, postponing? Or will you pick up the mirror, cut your hands if you must, and gather your soul piece by piece? The choice is yours. But know this, the woman who chooses wholeness does not chase, does not beg, does not betray herself again. She chooses, she creates, she becomes. And so the mirror gleams, whole through its fractures, alive in its imperfection. The woman stands before it, no longer broken, no longer afraid. She is the paradox embodied, shadow and light, grief and joy, tenderness and fire. And in that paradox she is free. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.